Imagine the complete collapse of a nation's future. The Israelites, established in a fertile homeland by divine decree, are suddenly and violently uprooted. They are forced out of the very territory that was promised to their ancestors. 2 Kings 24 presents a difficult theological question. It asks how a God who provides a land of blessing could reach a point where he decides to take it all back. God treated this eviction as the enforcement of the specific fine print found in an existing legal agreement. This diagram maps out the agreement, the covenant. It functioned as a divine contract branching into two paths. Obedience secured residency. Disobedience led to exile. Residency was strictly contingent on God's instructions. When ignored, the exile mechanism was activated. The Israelites understood these high stakes. They entered into this agreement voluntarily when they first arrived in Canaan. For a modern believer, understanding the mechanics of this conditional contract is a necessary starting point for navigating their own relationship with God. The legal violations that triggered the exile accumulated over centuries, reaching a crisis point during the reign of King Manasseh. His actions constituted a massive breach of the covenant terms. Records show Manasseh filled Jerusalem with the blood of the innocent. This specific violation was so severe and so contrary to the core of the agreement that the text notes God's refusal to pardon the debt. Instead of correcting these failures, the kings who followed willfully maintained the state of legal default that Manasseh began. King Jehoiakim actively replicated the behavior of his predecessors. He added to the spiritual debt of the nation rather than seeking to resolve it. Finally, King Zedekiah mirrored that same disobedience. He served as the final link in a chain of leadership that refused to honor the divine contract. A systemic, generational refusal to live within God's set boundaries eventually triggered the disaster in Jerusalem, moving far beyond the scope of any single mistake. As the rebellion compounded, the weight of these violations pushed God's anger to a tipping point in the heart of the kingdom. The mechanical rules of the covenant then took over. Because God is just, he remained legally bound to enforce the penalties his people had previously agreed to. The penalty clause resulted in the physical removal of the people from their land and from the immediate presence of God. This outcome serves as a clear proof of God's integrity. He proved himself to be a keeper of covenants, even when the terms required him to execute judgment. This ancient history isn't just a record of the past. It sets the logical stage for the modern believer's reality. This matching framework compares two eras. On the left, the physical land of Canaan. On the right, the believer's eternal kingdom. The New Testament treats the physical past as a model for the spiritual present, showing God operates with the same consistency across both. This connection is why 2 Peter chapter 1 warns that believers who do not live according to God's will risk the exact same outcome as the ancient Israelites. In this context, losing access to the eternal kingdom is the spiritual equivalent of the ancient exile to Babylon. God's promises of blessing and salvation remain linked to a life lived within his established instructions. There is a consistent relationship between daily obedience and the security of a believer's eternal inheritance.